Up next, the Cannabis Reporter Radio Show with Snowden Bishop. After this message.
Evergreen's calling.
Now that doctors and patients have discovered the many benefits of hemp-derived CBD, Alpine Miracle's nano-emulsion CBD formula is one of the most bioavailable on the market today. It's 100% THC-free, so you can order it online anywhere in the U.S. Order yours today at alpinemiracle.com. Scientists are just beginning to understand its essential role in maintaining optimal health. Get yours today. Use the code REPORTER and receive 10% off. Don't wait. Get it now at alpinemiracle.com. And now, it's time for the Cannabis Reporter Radio Show with Snowden Bishop. Listen in as Snowden interviews cannabis industry pioneers, marijuana experts, policymakers, medical practitioners, patients, and other amazing individuals with compelling stories to share. It all happens right now. Here's the Cannabis Reporter, Snowden Bishop.
Evergreen is calling.
Hi, and welcome back to the Cannabis Reporter Radio Show. I'm Snowden Bishop, and I'm glad that you joined me today. I don't know about you, but I can't recall ever being faced with such polarizing choices in an election. Being subjected to such divisive campaign rhetoric, it seems aimed to just turn us against one another. The most consequential problems we face aren't exclusive to one party or another, and can't be solved until we transcend the bitter tribalism and come together as Americans. That won't happen unless we find enough common ground to bridge the gaps between us and instead focus on issues that can unite us with a common purpose and finding solutions to problems that we have in common. Despite our differences, nearly everyone shares similar goals. I mean, who doesn't want to live a healthy, sustainable life and achieve the American dream? How we get there is often where we part ways politically. Our founding fathers established a broad framework of democracy intended to preserve a balance of power in government and protect our inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. While the authors might have had noble intentions based on conventional wisdom at the time, the liberties granted under the Constitution were limited to Anglo men, to the exclusion of women, Native Americans, and slaves of African descent. Over time, amendments have managed to equalize protection under the law, but not without a great deal of sacrifice. Over the last 50 years, laws have become more and more inclusive thanks to the tireless activism that's led to congressional measures and Supreme Court precedents barring discrimination on the basis of race, religion, disabilities, age, gender, sexual preference, and political persuasions. But despite the progress, an underpinning of racism and cultural bias still influences nearly every aspect of American life. Nowhere is this more evident than in our criminal justice system. It really is no accident that prohibition disproportionately targeted minorities. Several decades after the racially charged Reefer Madness campaign demonized marijuana, the war on drugs originated as Nixon's nefarious plot to suppress left-leaning votes by enacting the Controlled Substances Act. Since then, more than 22 million people have been incarcerated for non-violent marijuana offenses. Whereas white people were as likely as people of color to use illicit marijuana, minorities were 4 times more likely to go to prison. Even now that most states have either decriminalized or legalized cannabis, minorities are still being targeted and comprise the majority of marijuana offenders still serving time, even in states where marijuana is legal. That's the topic of today's show, and something our guest is working to change. Bonita Money began her career working behind the scenes in Hollywood, and she has since worked with some of the biggest names in the film industry. Despite having success as a young, up-and-coming actor and producer, she constantly encountered barriers that are common to women and minorities. After entering the cannabis industry, she experienced some of the same barriers that she encountered in the film business. But when the legal complexities of the emerging industry presented new challenges, She also discovered her own talent for making connections. She has since co-founded Women Above Ground, a networking organization that opens doors for women of color aspiring to become cannabis entrepreneurs and provides the resources and connections necessary for them to navigate the tricky legal cannabis market. She's also co-founder of NDICA, which provides resources and connections for people who've been incarcerated for marijuana offenses and helps them find work in the cannabis industry. Bonita, thank you so much for joining me. I'm really eager to delve into this topic with you, and so I appreciate your being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored.
You're certainly welcome. I'm really curious to ask you about Women Above Ground, but before I do that, as I was mentioning in the opening, the entire prohibition movement early on was race-based, as was the Controlled Substances Act back in the 1970s. And since then, it's really had such a horrible impact on low-income communities and people of color. And so when you started working in cannabis to bring people of color into this movement, you're also working toward getting records expunged. Tell me how you started.
Well, when I first got into the cannabis industry, well, first of all, I come from the TV and film industry. That's been my career for 25 years, and went into cannabis about 4 years ago. And so I was really looking to find my passion, my position, my space in this industry. Didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I knew that I wanted to be in this industry. So going to conferences and networking with, other cannabineurs and people that were just, curious about cannabis as well. I just found that there were very few people that looked like me. And there was not people of color that were in the industry in any major way. But yet people of color have been imprisoned because of this plant for years, decades. And ultimately there's still a lot of people of color that are in prison that are paying the price for the war on drugs because of, I would say, the targeting of the communities of color. So ultimately, this is why I just felt that when I started Women Above Ground, that there needs to be a platform for women of color to be able to network, to find resources, to get educated, just to get into the industry.
I admire that because I think that there is still a disparity in the criminal justice system. And I know that a lot of records have been expunged, but just not enough. And it's really taken a toll, I think, on those communities and ruined lives in general. So it's really encouraging to know that you're out there doing this. And tell me about Women Above Ground, because that's also fascinating.
Well, Women Above Ground basically, again, is a networking organization that basically empowers women of color to enter into the cannabis industry. And, we provide resources, education, networking. And it's just something that, again, very few women of color can find out there. I know that when I first got in the industry, it was just non-existent. So it was something that was needed. And then also, I don't know if you know about my other organization, but I have NDICA, which is the National Diversity and Inclusion Cannabis Alliance. So it's NDICA. And we do pretty much the same thing, but it's a broader based organization. So we work with just people of color, social equity, social justice. And that's where all the expungement clinics come in, is because ultimately there's over 200,000 people in just LA alone that would qualify for cannabis expungements. And it's amazing how they don't really take advantage of these free expungement clinics, because I think a lot of them are just afraid to come out. And that just happened yesterday at one of our clinics, is that because we did it at a college that was close to a police station, people felt that it was a setup and didn't want to come down. So it was, it's quite interesting to see how fearful people of color are of law enforcement.
Yeah, well, and rightly so. I would think, there's a history there that can't be ignored, obviously. But And so at these expungement clinics, you're basically explaining to them, and you have people from the legal community as well who are explaining to people how to go about applying to get their records expunged. Is that how that works?
Well, we are partners with LARP, which is Los Angeles Regional Reentry Partnership, and also the LA County Public Defender's Office. So the Public Defender's Office, they actually provide all the attorneys from their office. So they're volunteers that come in, over like 20 attorneys and probably over like 10 paralegals from their office that comes in and volunteers and donates their time to do all this. So they pull all the records right there, at the clinics, and then they do all the paperwork. And a lot of these cannabis convictions under Prop 64 are just basically automatically dropped, so they don't really have to go through the process like under Prop 47, where those have to be filed, and then there's a process through the court. So with the Prop 64, which is awesome, those are just pretty much automatically dropped.
That's fantastic. And then those who do have a record, are they also allowed to enter the business on a professional level?
Absolutely. Well, LA County, well, I'm sorry, not the county, LA City specifically, we have a social equity plan. So what that means is that if you come from a specific zip code that was basically targeted and impacted by the war on drugs, then you would qualify for as a social equity applicant. So the qualifications would be under Tier 1 would be low income, a cannabis conviction, and also coming from the zip codes. And that would give you priority for a retail license.
Right. Well, that's pretty exciting for people. I mean, one of the things that is a problem in a lot of these states when they pass the laws, they insist that people entering the business or applying for licenses have to have a clean record, which is really sad for people who were in the underground cannabis movement
Mm-hmm.
and imprisoned for it, which is really quite a shame. But I'm hoping that states are beginning to realize the value in having people who do have prior experience in cannabis entering the business and going about expunging these records. And I think California is more progressive than most states when it comes to this sort of thing. Anyway, kudos to you for doing this. And when I first learned about you, it was actually through a business partner of mine. We're working on a follow-up to The Hempsters Plant the Seed in a new documentary series, Diana Oliver, and she couldn't have said higher things about you. But she mentioned to me that you have quite a story to tell, and as we were talking, she said, be sure to ask Bonita about the woman in her life who inspired her because it's a fascinating story. And she didn't tell me what it was, but my curiosity is completely piqued. And if you're comfortable talking about it, I'd love to hear it.
I think what she's talking about is I have a topical cream called That Glass Jar, and it's a cannabis cream that cured the MRSA bacteria, well, it killed the MRSA bacteria. And it was my girlfriend, Princess Inga, that was dying of MRSA. And so basically that was, I think, just that whole situation and the cannabis saving her life was, I think, the turning point for me, which made me to say that, I was all in and really changed all of our lives. So I think that's what she's talking about.
You know what? I read about that as I was doing a little bit of homework. It was incredible because she actually had MRSA. Is that the MRSA? Is it a virus or is it an infection?
MRSA it's a bacterial infection that's it's not treatable or curable with any type of pharmaceuticals. No antibiotics. It's a superbug, basically.
Right. And it was from a surgery.
Yeah.
Yeah. And online, there were actually photographs of the difference from when the infection was in full swing to after using, it looked like it was a cannabis-based product with coconut oil and other botanicals. And it was astonishing to see that within weeks, the infection was completely gone and the skin was healing. And that is a fascinating story. So she was a close friend of yours.
Yeah, she's like one of my best friends, absolutely. And after 54 days of conventional treatment with, vancomycin and $30,000 later, because the treatment is that expensive. It's an intravenous treatment with the antibiotic, and it just killed her system. And basically, it was not working at all. And so they kept cutting away at the infected area. It just kept coming back, and it was just it was at a point where the doctor said, "Look, either we amputate the area or you're going to die." So it was going, at that point, it went into her blood. So that's when she was like, "You know what? I'm not amputating. Nope, I'm not." And just went home to write her will and started researching, and looked for alternate ways to work with MRSA. And she saw that cannabis could possibly work. And she called me because at that point I was making oils. So I never worked on a topical. And so ultimately I had a girlfriend that was making, she was making topicals in Maine. And so I asked her what was in hers, because through my research, I found that there was other organic extracts that would be very key to being like natural antibiotics and natural antibacterials. So I needed to infuse all of those into a cream, and so which I did, and then I made her an oil which she can ingest, and that would work with the blood. And yeah, it basically killed the infection in about 6 days.
That is absolutely astonishing. And we've talked a lot about how cannabis topicals can really improve skin quality and help conditions like eczema. But one of the things I wasn't aware of was that it could be used also for infections. So that is fascinating. And are you going to be making this oil available to the public? Are you in the process of developing a product?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much developed. I mean, and I've treated like numerous patients since that, since that miracle happened. But I basically stopped like putting it out there just because when, the government just basically took the patent on CBDs and we couldn't use it on labeling and all that, I just had to rebrand. So that's what we're in the process of doing now.
Yeah. Well, and how is she doing now?
Oh, she's great. She's alive. That's what counts.
It's an incredible thing to see when people who have really experienced a lack of healing through conventional pharmaceuticals, and when they go to cannabis, it's incredible. People can heal for the first time. So what's next for you now? What are you working on currently?
Well, my focus right now, which it's been for the last probably 6 months, has just been the LA Social Equity Plan, and also trying to move the social equity plan into other states and cities, because we're the only state that has a true social equity plan. So, and actually Jerry Brown just signed the bill to create a state social equity plan, which Senator Stephen Bradford, he authored and got that passed. And it actually has funding. So we have $10 million in funding for it too. So that's huge for us, because with the social equity plan, we only had them in 4 cities, which was LA, Oakland, San Francisco, and Sacramento. And so what that means, just so that the audience can be clear, is the social equity plan means that for every one general license that's issued for retail, which would be in dispensaries, there has to be 2 issued to people that qualify as a social equity applicant. So again, the majority of those licenses will be held by people of color.
Wow.
Which is a game changer.
That's fantastic. And what about the other cities in California? Can people from elsewhere come into the city and apply for any of these licenses, or must they be residents in those cities specifically?
Yeah, you had to have lived in those cities, because again, it's for the people and the communities that were impacted by the war on drugs. So there's specific zip codes that you have to come from in order to qualify.
Okay, well, that completely makes sense. And are you taking this to the state level first before trying to expand out into other states?
The thing about it is, though, is that on a state level, yes. But if their city does not have ordinances for cannabis, it wouldn't matter anyway, because they couldn't, if you can't apply on a city level, then the state won't approve you as well. So you have to have come from cities that actually have cannabis ordinances.
Right. And through California, with a statewide program like this, it didn't cross my mind that there are cities that are still not implementing the regulation within their city limits.
Right.
I didn't realize that. That's interesting, something I need to look into for sure. But I think that it's going to be a bit challenging in some of the other states to bring this program in, because they're just not nearly as open as California is to social equity programs. Have you run up against any roadblocks there?
Oh, absolutely. And the thing about it is just because in California, we have been medicinally legal for 22 years, where other states were never legal at all. So a lot of states are just, basically taking baby steps because now they're just trying to figure out how they're going to move forward on the, just on the medicinal level.
Yeah.
So they're basically where we were 22 years ago. So for them, yeah, just a social equity plan to be implemented would be awesome in the beginning because that's what they need versus them just starting to issue licenses and not really think about that social equity piece.
Well, I know in our state, for example, we're in Arizona, and it seems that every step of the way since the medical law was implemented, there are certain people in certain counties that are fighting it tooth and nail, and I still just don't get it. I mean, they're making life very difficult for a lot of people, and I mean, and even patients being prosecuted for having tinctures, and that's a whole other story that we've been following really closely. And it's insane. And people going to jail, card carrying patients going to jail for having cannabis that they purchased in a dispensary is just incredibly unjust. And it's all about trying to paint patients, and especially patients of color, some of the most egregious problems that we have are where people of color have been prosecuted. And we just had a case, the Jones case, which went to the Arizona Appellate Court. And his plea to get a conviction for having hashish in his car that he purchased at a dispensary, having that overturned, failed in the appellate court, and they're taking it to the Arizona Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. And it'll be interesting to see what happened, but they basically sent him back to jail to complete a 3-year sentence. So he had another 2 years left on his conviction, which is just such a shame. And he has to remain in prison while the case is being appealed, and who knows how long it'll take. And I hear about these things, and it makes my blood boil because it is so unjust. And, the whole war on drugs really is steeped in racism. And it's very frustrating to just see how it's continuing still to this day.
Well, even more so now that we've gone recreational legal, it's like it's going to be the new war on drugs. Under Prop 215, which was our medicinal regulations for and bill for California, it was a lot of these things were in the gray area. So law enforcement, they weren't so clear on, who to arrest, what for, just things like that. Can you smoke in your car? I don't know. It was that kind of thing. So, but now it's very clear. There's no consumption in the car. There's no consumption like in Vegas. There's no consumption anywhere but your home. And the problem with that is 80% of, I would say, the consumers there would be tourists. So the minute they walk out of the dispensary, they are doing an illegal activity. Because where are they going to smoke? They can't smoke in a hotel. They're not supposed to smoke on the streets, on the car, but they're consuming. So things like that weren't well thought out, when they were writing these bills. And so, those things we need to fix because it's just not okay that it gives law enforcement the upper hand to just kind of arrest when they want to and pick and choose who they want to arrest. Just like in Colorado, when they went legal, the arrests for people of color went up 20%. So we're trying to obtain that data now to see, since our legalization, has that happened? Has the number of people of color, the arrests for people of color, has that risen?
That's an interesting statistic. I didn't realize that. And yeah, that'll be interesting to find out if that's happening in California as well. Mm-hmm. But also, California kind of pulled a fast one, too, because of the illegality of CBD ever since the Department of Justice created a separate identifying code for CBD within Schedule 1 so that it was separated out from cannabis, which it makes no sense whatsoever why they would do that. But what it did is that it created this ambiguity in the law that made it impossible for people to ascertain whether or not, selling CBD by itself was actually a legal thing when these laws, even California, which thought about everything, they never mentioned cannabidiol or CBD in the law. So therefore, selling CBD by itself as a food substance, they sent out a notice saying that this was no longer going to be legal. So I need to find out whether or not they've reversed that, but it was based on a court case. The Ninth Circuit reversed their ruling on legal hemp food substances because of the CBD labeling in Schedule 1 on the federal level. So it's just created so much confusion. And California is probably the biggest market for hemp-derived CBD. And when California put this notice out, they didn't include CBD that was naturally occurring in THC-laced cannabis that's for sale in edibles, for example, but just CBD, theoretically from hemp, that is added to food substances in edibles and beverages and all of that. So there is so much confusion. And just because they weren't specific enough, it kind of goes back to that adage, be careful what you wish for. You have to be very specific, because if you're not specific enough, what you're wishing for might come true, but you might not have thought of something.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's it. Mm-hmm.
It really is. And, when you go back in time, too, and consider that on the diversity front, which I think it's so important for people to understand that prohibition, the war on drugs, has so disproportionately affected communities of color. For every 10 people arrested, most of them are people of color and or people from low-income backgrounds. So this work that you're doing, it really is incredibly important. And I think, too, that shedding a spotlight on it, and especially when you have public figures that are coming out and talking about it as well, I think that it is going to start influencing policy in places where they don't yet have any cannabis regulation. Who are some of the public figures that you're working with right now in trying to get this message out?
Well, someone who was very instrumental when I first started in the industry was Marvin Washington, the ex-NFL player that has the ISO Sports line. He was one of my diversity panel members, so we'd speak at conferences together. And then Montel Williams, he was very, very supportive and instrumental in getting Women Above Ground some national attention, because he went on ABC and spoke about one of my signature events for Women Above Ground is Canna Cool Lounge. And so he did a soft launch at my event for his brand, which is Lenitive Labs. And then he went on ABC and just said that there need to be more organizations like Women Above Ground that was supporting people of color, that were coming into the cannabis industry or trying to come into the cannabis industry, because there were so many barriers that were put up, and again, because of the war on drugs, we have a lot of brown and black men that are in prison because of this. And now you have, the men and, these corporate suits and the white men that are now controlling the industry. And it's just not okay. It's $1 billion industry that soon will be $1 trillion industry. And you have people that now cannot participate because of either their criminal records or because they're in prison. So things like that, we need to address, and we need to make change. We need to, versus just talking about it, we need to, again, we have to just rectify all this that has happened to these people. So, and then I have a lot of celebrity brands I work with, like Yuck Mouth from the Loonies. I'm working with also Project Pat, who's part of 3 6 Mafia, and then CeCe Peniston, and let's see, Dana Dane, the rapper. There's so many. Hope Flood, comedian Hope Flood. So, right now, I think it's just a time that, people of color just really start supporting each other and working together as well. Because I also have a Black-owned social equity hemp farm in Wisconsin. And I just spoke at the Black Farmers National Conference 2 weeks ago. And I was able to meet a lot of urban farmers, Black urban farmers and Black rural farmers that ultimately have this land. And now with the the farm bill, the hemp bill, we can now, grow hemp, and they should take advantage of that. But they just don't have the knowledge of what to do. And so that's what I did a workshop on, was to basically assist them in just coming into the industry, now versus, missing the boat.
And how tough is it for them to find financing to do this? Because I know in addition to not really knowing what to do or how to go about it, I imagine that funding a new startup hemp farm is not an inexpensive proposition. Is there funding available?
There is, but it's very limited. And this is why we're trying to create incubators. We're trying to create funding through different sources of, investment. But it's there, and right now it's becoming even more accessible. So we are finding that, but again, it's not enough. If you had like a cannabis cultivator, a white cannabis cultivator and a black cannabis cultivator, trust me, the white cannabis cultivator, even though he was like less proficient, he would get funding before someone who was a master grower that had better, that was a better cultivator, but was black. He would not, trust me, he would not be the one that they would choose to fund first.
Yeah. Well, I think that's
unfortunate.
It is unfortunate, and I think that's probably true across the board. I'm glad to hear that Marvin Washington is involved with what you're doing too. He's such an incredible spokesperson. We've had him on the show several times, and I spoke with him recently, and he's working on the U.S. Supreme Court case right now to end the prohibition on patients carrying cannabis across state lines, and I'm really anxious to see how that pans out, but he's an incredible spokesperson, as is Montel. And we'll be speaking with him in the coming weeks. We've probably in next week sometime, we're going to be interviewing him. He's very involved in, his brand is incredible. His story with multiple sclerosis is incredible and inspiring. So I'm really glad to see that there are so many sports figures and, people who have a presence in public speaking out on this issue, because I think it really is helping to shape policy. And the more public figures that come out and talk about it, and just in the couple of years that I've been doing this, I've seen a lot more openness to speaking out. For so long there, people were, they felt like they had reputations to protect, and especially political figures. Even if they advocated in private, coming out and speaking about it was still difficult. In fact, I've run into that
It's still that way.
Yeah, I've run into that just recently. There are people running for office who I know are advocates, but they're just not talking about it. And it's pretty interesting. And I went to a rally the other day with Bernie Sanders speaking on behalf of David Garcia, who's running for governor here in the state of Arizona. And it was really interesting that Bernie was very outspoken about legalizing cannabis, whereas David Garcia was still a little bit shy, and possibly rightly so, because he's running in a state that is fighting the medical law tooth and nail. But I just thought it was really interesting, and how difficult it is, even with all we know right now.
It's a lot of hard work, that's for sure. And it's going to be that. We're far from just evening out the playing field here. So, because again, we have so many issues state to state with social equity, social justice. And so, as hard as it's been here, I know what the fight is going to be in other states. So, but we're prepared, we're ready, we're excited to, have these conversations, with the right politicians in those states. So we've been approached by different House representatives and senators from different states to help them shape their social equity bill.
I think social equity and criminal justice reform is such a hot topic right now, too, even outside of cannabis. And
oh, yeah, exactly.
It just seems that there's sort of an underpinning of racism that's creeping up from under the shadows. For so long, it just was not socially correct or politically correct to make racism a blatant outward manifestation on a political level. And it's been astonishing to me to see the amount of racism that is creeping into our political discourse and in our social discourse, and even just the hate mongering that for so long was just, it just seemed like it was unheard of for quite a while in high profile public settings. And now there are even, as we've seen in some of the special elections, racism was just a huge part of it. And we're seeing now, like in Georgia, for example, the governor's race, the voter suppression that's going on right now is just astonishing, and how people can actually get away with that despite the court battles that have been fought and won in favor of abolishing these practices, and yet they're still coming up. And it just seems like there's a new permission to make racism a part of political discourse. What are your feelings on that?
No, I agree. No, absolutely. And I just think it's unfortunately, it's the, it's it's the person that is leading our country right now, and shouldn't be, that is really creating even more racial tension and more racism. So, ultimately, and it's going to continue, and it's going to get worse. I mean, see what happened, I guess, yesterday with the shooting in Pittsburgh. I mean, and it's just, again, we have, a leader that shouldn't be a leader, and ultimately, this is again affecting what's happening, in our country. So racism is not going to get better anytime soon. That's for sure. So ultimately, I'm just hoping that, we can protect our cannabis, at this point. I mean, that's my work right now, and that's what I need to be focused on, but, definitely it's something that, again, with social justice and reform at this point needs to happen. And we do a lot of that work. We do a lot of reentry work. We just worked on a major voter drive, and then also we do a lot of housing and employment assistance, things like that people have to deal with when they come out of prison, because of course they're going to be discriminated against because they do have a criminal record, which is really, to me, unconstitutional, because, you've paid your dues, and now you should be able to come out and be able to get housing, and get a job, be able to support yourself, and, if they're not able to get those basic needs and those basic, just, I would say, not even privileges, but just basic things that they should have as a human being, then that's going to affect, recidivism. So that's a big issue. So you see so many people that go back to prison because of the fact that they can't find jobs. No one will hire them because of their criminal records, and no one will give them housing, which I just find ridiculous. Because how are these people supposed to be, I would say, productive citizens when they don't even have the basics? So again, with expungement clinics, that assist so much in just assisting them in just having normal lives. So, I just got a call the other day, and a gentleman was saying, and he was a Latino guy, and he says, I've been trying to get my record expunged for years. I've hired attorneys. I just can't get the right help. And I just, and I don't know why, but I told him to come in and, see us so that we can assist him. But he said it's been affecting, his employment, housing, everything. And, so these kind of things, it hurts my heart to hear, because these, you have people that really want to do the right thing. But again, there's so many barriers for them just to just live a decent life, because they can't have the basics. So yeah, these are things that we have to work on.
Yeah, because it's been a vicious cycle for so long. And I can't help but think of conversations in the Nixon tapes, the deliberate elimination of communities of color from the voter pool because they were on the more liberal front and threatened the president at that time. And yeah, so it is such a vicious cycle. But as we know, the cannabis industry started out of racism, even back as far as 1937 with the Reefer Madness campaign. Here we are in 2018, and as ironies go, cannabis could be the catalyst for ending the racism that is part of it. I can't help but feel that cannabis really is one of those issues that can save so many aspects of our society, from environmental to the social justice to the, transforming medicine and creating a cleaner, better way for people to heal themselves without addiction, and the economy and all of the opportunity that it provides to people, in a $1 billion, soon to be $1 trillion industry, as you said. So it's very interesting to me. And it is ironic if cannabis can sort of lead the way and paving the way for a more equitable criminal justice system and help to lift people out of that cycle of not able to get jobs or housing or even vote in some states when they get out because they're being discriminated against. So it's important work. It's very important work. So, kudos to you for doing this. I mean,
Thank you.
You're certainly welcome. So is there anything else that you have a burning desire for people to know about you or about the work that you're doing? And, are you looking for volunteers? Are you looking for more people to assist in what you're doing?
Oh, yeah, we're always looking for volunteers. We also have an internship program. So and it's just not with my organization. We have paid internships with different dispensary partners, cultivation partners. So what we do, it's very important for phase 3, which is going to be the retail licensing for LA. So we want these applicants to be truly prepared, so that they will know how to own and operate a retail business. A dispensary is not any different from the liquor store. So they're just going to have to stay in compliance, know what the ordinances, the regulations are. They're going to have to, basically know how to run a day-to-day, run, or just know how the day-to-day operations of a dispensary works. And that's why we put them in these, dispensaries or cultivation centers, so they can learn that. Because there are a few variables, of course, like banking issues, things like that. So they have to know how to work around that. But just being really just knowledgeable about running a business, basic accounting, because, of course, they're going to have partners and investors. And so they need to be aware that ultimately, they have to educate themselves. If they don't already know, if they haven't run a dispensary already, because there are some applicants that were underground operators. So, of course, they know how to do business, but, in that illegal market. So we just want them to understand that compliance is very key to staying in business. And so those are the things that we give them opportunity to learn, which I don't know any other programs out there that are doing this as, I would say, broad as we are. And we also have an educational platform that they're required to take if they want us to guide them and assist them, and give them the technical assistance with their applications, because that's another thing we help with. So, if there's any people that qualify for the social equity plan, then we definitely would like to hear from them, and we'd like to assist them. So I would definitely like people to reach out if they're looking just to join an organization that could assist them in resources, networking, education, anything like that. I have a lot of experts on my board. So, we also have a mentorship program. So anything like that people are looking for, we would definitely like to, welcome them. So they can go to my website, which is www.thendica.org. So indica is not with an I. So a lot of people think it's like indica, the strain, but it's just NDICA. So it's theindica.org.
And when I was looking at the acronym, I didn't put 2 and 2 together. It's interesting that when you say it as a word, it is indica. I'm sure that wasn't by accident. Yeah,
well,
perhaps.
It kind of was. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
And they can just go to our website. We have free memberships as well as like business memberships, So but we want to make it accessible to everybody. And that's why we created a starter membership, because a lot of these organizations, they charge so much money for people to get involved and they really don't get any benefits, and we don't want to be that group. We want to be very effective. We want to make sure that, we create a very equitable environment, for our members.
And then as far as the legal resources too, you're relying on the public defender's office, I heard you say a little earlier, and then are you looking for private attorneys as well to become involved and donate time?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we've worked with private attorneys as well. The thing about it is that with the public defender's office, it's such a great partnership because they make everything so simple and everything streamlined. They've really got a system that works so smoothly. They have the access to live scan, all that. So, we are definitely looking for other attorneys though to work with us, especially in different areas. To work with a social equity applicant. So definitely, even like accountants, anything like that, where they can also be mentors to, our social equity applicants.
That's very good to know. And yeah, I'd love to stay in touch with you about this. And with our network, I think that this is something that people would be interested in, especially here in Arizona, where we have so many government officials still fighting the medical cannabis law. So there's a really robust legal community here that is eager to work with organizations that are trying to push the criminal justice equity and the social equity forward in the state. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. And I'm sure that people listening in other states as well, where they're really trying to push forward cannabis regulation on their statewide level, would be really interested to get involved as well and see how there can be some synergies to push some of these new regulations forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that the environment in the Department of Justice in the last couple of years has really been closed off to all of this. But I'm hoping that with the election and with so many candidates favoring criminal justice reform, and particularly where it concerns cannabis, I think that it's possible that we could see some reform on the federal level if we go in that direction. Because if it doesn't go in that direction, it's going to be very difficult, I think, to push anything through on a national level until we get a more amenable group of Congress people and senators in office who will push it forward.
Absolutely.
And who aren't afraid of standing up to the special interests that are fighting this, because I really think it does go back to that.
I agree.
And at least here, private prisons, alcohol industry, the pharmaceutical industry, corn and soy, or biofuels. I mean, it's everywhere. And that's a big monster to have to tackle, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But
absolutely.
Yeah, but I think with organizations like yours who are really pushing this out into the public eye, I foresee change in the near future. So it's very encouraging. It's very encouraging to hear what you're doing. And so any other things that you'd like our audiences to know?
Well, if there are in other states, I definitely want them to reach out because, we can assist in, creating that social equity kind of framework for them and help them shape and give them support in, bringing that up to their politicians and, getting someone to sponsor a bill. So, I mean, all that's very important because we have Senator Curtis out of Ferguson, Missouri, that is shaping that social equity bill in Missouri. So they're looking to have that already in place when they do go legal, which should be next year. And they lost the vote before, but I think they're going to go ahead and this round and legalize. So, and having that social equity bill in place already, it just makes just a world of difference. So of how it's going to roll out. So yeah. So if there's anybody that's in other states and they have any questions, They want to know how to get in, what they need to do to assist in pushing social equity forward in their states, their cities, whatever. Definitely reach out because we work on a national level.
I was very encouraged to hear what's going on in Missouri. It seems like they have a robust advocacy there as well. And I believe it's Proposition 2 that's on the ballot. I think it'll help so many people there. You know, it's really difficult to imagine what it's like to live in a state that has absolutely zero regulation on cannabis these days with all that we know and with all that's available online. You know, how can a patient in Idaho who knows that cannabis could help them with a condition sit by and realize that they have zero access or zero legal access, I should say, because just about anyone anywhere can get illegal cannabis if they really want it. But it's astonishing, and it must put people into this really sorry state knowing that they could be helped, but they can't get legal access. So it's necessary to human health, as we're learning. So we'll see. It's necessary to our economy, too. And I think that the success that we've seen in these states that are legal now, the economic upside is so great that these more conservative states cannot ignore that. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with these new measures that are on the ballot this year, and also with Canada. I'm really encouraged to see an entire country legalize on a national level in our hemisphere. So that should provide even more proof, the proof we need for our government to start acting on it. So, yeah, it's really interesting. Well, Bonita, I am very delighted that you were able to join me for this interview, and I thank you for the work that you're doing, and I thank you for taking the time to talk to us about this. I think your work is important, and
yeah, I really appreciate the support, and you having me on the show and creating more awareness, for people of color. That's just awesome.
You're certainly welcome. We look forward to supporting it in any way that we can. So hopefully we can stay in touch, and please feel free to send any content you'd like us to put out with our network, because we've got a sizable network of advocates who are eager to help other organizations to push this movement forward. So I just say thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
You're certainly welcome.
Again, I appreciate you having me on the show, and I look forward to, being on again at some point when things develop, and, I'll keep you abreast on what's going on. And, people can keep up with what we're doing on, our social media. Yeah, if you can throw all that up there so people have access, that would be great. I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Bonita. Oh, so it is time to bring yet another show to a close. Once again, I'd like to personally thank my guest, Bonita Money, for sharing her insights and knowledge with us today. If you'd like to learn more about the work that she's doing at NDICA or at Women Above Ground, please visit us online at thecannabisreporter.com. Click podcast to find today's episode, and I'll post her bio along with information and links to her websites. We have so many people to thank. First, I would like to express our gratitude for our radio sponsors, Canosphere Biotech and HealthTerra. We certainly couldn't be doing this without you. I'd also like to thank Eric Goodall, the composer of our theme song, and the team here at the Cannabis Reporter radio show for making us shine. And it always goes without saying how much we appreciate our programming directors at XRQK Radio Network and Society Bites Radio for distributing our show. And last but not least, thanks to all of you for listening. I'm Snowden Bishop, inviting you to join me again next week, same time, same place, for another episode of the Cannabis Reporter radio show. Until we meet again, be safe, stay informed, share what you've learned, and make it a great day.
Evergreen is calling. Evergreen is calling. Evergreen is calling.
Now that doctors and patients have discovered the many benefits of hemp-derived CBD, Alpine Miracles Nano-Emulsion CBD formula is one of the most bioavailable on the market today. It's 100% THC-free, so you can order it online anywhere in the U.S. Order yours today at alpinemiracle.com. Scientists are just beginning to understand its essential role in maintaining optimal health. Get yours today. Use the code REPORTER and receive 10% off. Don't wait. Get it now at alpinemiracle.com.
You're listening to the Cannabis Reporter Radio Show with Snowden Bishop.
You're busy, running around from work to kids to evening events. Healthcare shouldn't be adding to your daily running around. Simplify your healthcare with Healthterra. For only $15 per month per individual or $18 per month per family with up to 9 kids, by the way, you can eliminate doctor office visits with 24/7 access to doctors via phone, video, or the mobile app. Not only do you get prescriptions filled over the phone, but save up to 85% on those prescriptions. This is a supplemental plan and not insurance. Healthcare made easy. Healthterra.com.